Romans, residents of LACD 13. Nobody drives in LA. On this episode, we are talking with Rogelio Pardo, who is the transit deputy for Hugo Soto Martinez from LACD 13. So we'll be talking a lot about Echo Park, Silver Lake, Atwater Village, pieces of Larchmont, and others. It's a pretty dense district. I work in that district, so I was stoked to learn more about what's going on transit side there. Eric wanted me to mention that Hugo Soto Martinez, Rogelio's boss, helped get funding restored to LA DOT that the mayor's budget had called for cutting significantly. It's possible that Rogelio had a hand in that. And even if he didn't, he's great anyway. We'd also like to thank Eric's cats, who kindly lent us their cat trees to use as mic stands for this podcast. Eric, how did you get here today?
Well, we're recording in my apartment, so I woke up here.
This is very close to where I work, and usually I take the E-line and the 90-94. However, today I wanted to get some road practice in on the motorcycle or the motor scooter during daylight, so I took the Vespa today, which I have only driven it very early in the morning or very late at night so far. So daylight driving was a new experience for sure. It struck me today as I was going down Wilshire just how much mental endurance you need to ride a motorcycle safely. Like, because if your mind starts wandering, like, oh no, something's sneaking up on me. So on one hand, it's easier for visibility because, during the day you could see things, and my stigmatism is pretty aggressive. Yeah, it's also higher stakes during the day. So I'm not sure if I prefer night driving or day driving, scootering yet, but I do love when you can activate the God mode power that is lane splitting. Truly, whenever I get to split, cut up ahead of people,
I just terrifying though.
I feel like I'm glowing with, anime Super Saiyan energy, just really bending the city of Los Angeles to my will. It's great. Yeah.
Wait, do you have a radio on your Vespa? Like, can people hear you coming from that?
I don't have a
Or a very Italian beep.
Yeah, we do. I do have a very Italian beep horn, which I do use. Sometimes if when cars are beeping at each other when they're angry, I'll sometimes just chime in with a little beep at the end of it just to just to participate in the cacophony. And which that brings us to our special guest today, Rogelio. How did you get here today?
A little simpler. I just rode my bike here.
And the follow-up question to this, which, Eric and I have answered many, many, many times, is who are you? How did you get here in the broad picture? How did you get to where you are today?
Of course. And first of all, thank you guys for having me here. So how did I get to transportation planning? It is a fun, long story that I will kind of condense, but I was, in short, studying environmental science and engineering at UCLA, and one of our classes was about water engineering, and we got to go see a pilot project that, Eric, I'm sure you're familiar with, the Riverdale Avenue low impact development or stormwater retention project. So they were doing this bunch of installations of bioswales. They were installing a community garden, and the whole goal was, let's see how this greener infrastructure works and how much cleaner the water will be at the entry point. And there's a block literally adjacent to the river in Elysian Valley or Frogtown, as some folks call it. Wasn't quite sure who was doing it. It was like junior year, so I didn't quite want to do water engineering when I grew up, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I asked my TA, like, who brings the engineers together to work with community members? Who's working with the policy people, and who's kind of bringing it all together? And he's like, well, you know what? I'm actually getting my PhD in urban planning. Might be something you're interested in. Had no clue how I was going to pivot. Graduated, interned with the LA County Bike Coalition. At that point, in college, I spent a lot of time riding bicycles. So it was kind of a very easy segue of something recreational to thinking about bicycles as a mode of transportation. Mm-hmm. Really just kind of opened the door, along with a travel study opportunity, which really was a culture shift from somebody that grew up in LA, was familiar with people having road rage, many times thought about leaving my car on the side of the freeway and riding my bike home. And so to be in a place where people were riding their bicycles to get to work or commuting with groceries, or trains and trams took up as much space, if not more space, than vehicles on the road. And this was in Geneva. It really kind of opened my mind in a different way. And I was like, why do we not have that here in LA? And so grad school, went through a couple of different jobs, and have spent the last 2 years serving with the council member's office with Hugo Soto Martinez here in District 13. And it's been some of the most rewarding work of my career so far.
I'm particularly interested in conversations about how people got to where they are, especially with urban planning and all of this sort of stuff. My background was originally in, digital media, art. My BA from forever ago was in art from Pennsylvania. When I moved out here, I initially started studying environmental science at Santa Monica College, but I just got totally blindsided by the amount of calculus that is required to survive chemistry, like the second chemistry class in the sequence. And I haven't done algebra since ninth grade. Oh no, I'm way in over my head. So I've since pivoted to sustainability, and I've been doing sustainability in commercials. So, but also trying to figure out how do any of these strange smattering hodgepodge skills that you've collected, how can you use it for the common good or progress? And as I try to figure that out myself, I love hearing from our guests who may be a little bit farther down that path too.
So I love a good origin story. So thank you for sharing that. But urban planning does really kind of lend itself to that. It's such a hodgepodge. It's such an intersectional discipline that I have colleagues that were previously writers or just. It's like their second or third career, and it's such an awesome space for that.
One of our coordinators too, he's looking into grad school or looking into going back to school for urban planning now too. It seems like there's a lot of crossover from waste, sustainability, that type of stuff into urban planning now.
Well, that's why my corny but true line that I coined is that transportation is at the intersection of everything. But your remark about your car leaving your car on the side of the road, that struck me because Evan Levitt, who does LA in a Minute, he said his favorite Los Angeles movie is Falling Down. And I was like, how does that reflect on someone who is a self-professed person that loves to drive? It's about a guy that, for those who don't know, who gets so angry about his traffic that he gets out and just beats up people as he walks across the city. And I'm like, your idea of getting out of your car, abandoning it, and riding a bike home, it's almost like a reboot of happy falling down, falling up, glowing up. That would be the movie.
Let's ride it, Kyle.
Yeah. Let's do it. We can use all recycled sets. And I'm usually the only person that maybe not the only person, but one of the few people working on set that takes the bus to set. And it's always an interesting conversation when people are like, where are you parked? How'd you get here? I took the bus. Or I'll roll up on my little one wheel and they're like, what? How did you get here? That. Something I was thinking of earlier today, just with regards to the conversation we're having today, because the vendor I work for is based in Atwater. So much of LA's transit feels like it completely ignores the film industry, which is one of our biggest draws to
We're kind of known for it.
Yeah, we're known for it. Apart from the perfect weather and having a lot of friends out here, that's initially why I thought I wanted to move out here. Then quickly realized, oh no, that's not for me at all. The way our system is designed, it makes it really hard to get to set, when you don't know where you're going to be, when you have to arrive at 4 a.m, or, if you're, in my case, get out at 11 o'clock at night, So you have to really be dedicated to do it. You can do it, and it's a lot easier than I was expecting since I've been doing it for a couple of months now, sans car. And even then, doing the wild commute bus times or, taking the Vespa at 4 a.m, there's no comparison between driving every day and the amount of terror that I would feel and the expense of maintaining the car. It's a hard sell.
Yeah, it's like transportation is at the intersection of everything, but it's also a blind spot. And that reminds me of what Ivy was saying when she was on, and that, all these people with their progressive issues and stuff, and then she'll try to get somebody to take the train or a bus, and they're like, oh, I love that you do that, But people are just not necessarily, I don't know.
It's hard to, like you both, I definitely am a strong believer that you got to walk the walk as well as talk the talk. It's so reflected in how measures, like Measure M or Measure R, even in the last decade, or Measure HLA, right? Huge turnout in support of it. Frankly, Measure HLA was more successful than I expected it to be.
Yeah, 2/3 of people voted for that.
I think almost 80 or 90%.
Oh, really?
In District 13.
Yeah,
District 13, right?
Some districts, yeah.
But it really speaks to how much people think about transit for everybody else, but not me, right? And those are conversations I have with friends, and it's like, guys, get on the damn bus.
Well, sometimes I think Metro has kind of framed it that way too much, where it's the emphasis is on, if we give more money to transit, that will get people out of their cars, not you out of your car. So it's like, vote for this because it'll make your car commute better, by getting some of these people off the road, which it does do that maybe somewhat, but that's not the real win is, hey, you can take the train now and not have to drive.
It's, hey, you are traffic.
Yeah.
Get out of it.
Yeah. You're not stuck in traffic. You are traffic.
About a year in, what's the quick vibe check on HLA implementation? Where are we at? Where are we headed?
Thanks, Eric, for preempting that with that sigh.
Tried to sigh off, Mike.
The ordinance was approved about a month ago. So that's exciting. We finally have something on paper and in the books. The next step really is going to be that prioritization, which we anticipate coming out soon. I actually do think that it's an exciting kick in the pants for the city. It's something that the city has needed. We can get into the nitty gritty or the details of it, but I think the gist of it is progress is happening. It was a kick in the pants that the city needed. It is forcing, or rather increasing the collaboration that we've started to see between departments, particularly Streets LA and LADOT. And I'm excited to see what comes next. I would also say that between HLA, the other thing that gives me hope as a resident and as a lifelong Angelino is the CIP, the Capital Infrastructure Plan. And these are two efforts that are really going to parlay into one another because it's going to give the city, a longer term strategy for how are we funding our infrastructure? How are we having these conversations about budgets over a 5, 10, 15-year horizon rather than every year in and out, where we're in position to choose our pet projects and hopefully push those forward, which is not a great way to build infrastructure. It's we are the second largest city in the country and somehow the only one at our size that does not have a proper CIP. So these are two kind of like nerdy, maybe esoteric-ish topics, but they give me hope, and I'm excited to see where they go.
Can you define a CIP for the listeners?
Yeah, so a CIP is a capital infrastructure plan. What a capital infrastructure plan does, it really provides an inventory of all the projects that a city will prioritize, fund, and implement, usually under some set guidelines. So maybe a 5, 10, and 15-year horizon. I'm just speaking from prior experiences. I'm not speaking to LA's CIP. Very excited to see what that happens. The important part of a CIP is that beyond it just being a list of projects, it usually is framed through some very specific values or criteria that help assign prioritization and really galvanize the need for these specific projects. And I think that's really helpful because it gives us, from a council office perspective, something that we can point to and let folks know, hey, here are all the values that as a city or as elected officials were agreed upon to guide projects. And here's what the prioritization looks like given our actual funding resources or our funding availability, as well as people resources, right? Right now, we're getting so many asks. And we, lack the funding and lack the people resources. And so it's really hard. I think the important thing of the CIP is it's going to allow us to transition from trying to fight for the limited resources and limited attention to make small steps on small pet projects and allow us to really focus on kind of a holistic vision for the city and implement that in a steady way, right? We have the bike plan, which, we have it in bits and pieces throughout the city, right? So how will the CIP help us, program it in a little bit more of a thoughtful manner?
Quick follow-up. Why have we never had a CIP before? Because it just seems like it gives the populace anxiety if you're checked in at all. Maybe that's part of the reason, though, is like to dissuade you from being following stuff in the city.
I think from an observer, and I'm taking off my professional hat here, but from an observer, it really seems in the last 10, 15 years, there's been this shift away from council office discretion, right? I think Vision Zero was a big step for LADOT to do that. And obviously that program is not without its successes and also challenges. But that was really a smart way where we could use data and values to say, as a city, the Department of Transportation is prioritizing projects based on these criteria, right? And those were based on what are the streets that are the most challenging and most dangerous for people that are walking. And I think that's been a helpful framing. I think we're seeing that a lot in the planning process, right? Especially after, previous CD14 elected officials and certain federal investigations, right? So there's been this need to, how do we go from individual discretion to more programmatic processes? And I think that might be a flavor of it. And I think, frankly, there's been a lot of advocacy around this in the last 7-8 years. I think Jessica Meany, if you're familiar with her and her work at Investing in Place, they've really been advocating and been the voice of, why don't we have a capital infrastructure plan? And it will hopefully be a place where we kind of pull together a lot of different topics that galvanize and kind of empower different community-based organizations, where there's the bicycle advocacy, the pedestrian advocacy, the transit advocacy, and bring them all to one place. So that was a long way of saying, not quite sure. Yeah. There's always been a desire for discretion. Sorry for getting really nerdy about it, but it really seems to be an opportunity to kind of come together and hopefully more collaboration than competition.
This is just from my perspective, and it could be completely not, representative of other people, but I do feel like people have I've sort of disengaged from the federal spectacle of politics somewhat at the same time that I've been like, wow, I should be paying more attention at local levels, because I feel like I actually have somewhat more of a say there. It comes down to your votes, and like you see those things, and I've never lived in a swing state, so and it just feels like all of the media attention is on that, and it's like I feel so powerless, but you can have some power in focusing on media stuff. So I don't know, I feel like there's been a lot of, but like I'm saying, it could just be me, but it feels like a lot of people have kind of turned their attention to local stuff.
As I've been getting more involved with city council meetings, or when I'm free on a Tuesday when the Santa Monica Council meets, great, I'm gonna go when I'm not working. The thing that pops up for me is, one, there's a lot more opportunities to get involved here than there are elsewhere. Like when I lived in a swing state, because so much of the focus is on national elections, there's not really anything to do for your local city council meeting. Like a lot of swing states don't have you can't vote directly on state ballot measures, so you're just really disengaged from the whole process. And I think California in particular has a long culture of that. Like, voting on state bills, great, let's go.
I will say I don't want to vote on as many things as we have. I'm like, that's why I vote for politicians to represent my, it's a representative democracy. I don't need to like read the fine print of everything and vote on it. Because also everything's always worded in a way where you're like, yeah, I'm for the children, and then you're like, oh, well, guess what? You just voted to close their schools.
Yeah, I think a plain text amendment might be a good thing to add. Right, like how people talk, maybe.
Yeah.
I think though with local elections, like national politics really get people fired up, and rightfully so, the way we're headed.
And also the media is all consolidated into multinational and big national corporations. There aren't local newspapers anymore, hardly.
Yeah. I think local stuff, though, it's equally stressful, just in a different way, because you're mostly in a super blue city like LA, you're mostly dealing with people who you agree with on 80-90% of issues. But the one thing that you don't agree on, you are going to fight rabidly about. The current drama in Santa Monica is a great park that the city's trying to build. There's one proposal that wants no housing, no revenue generation.
Sorry, is that where the airport is?
Right. The airport's being decommissioned in 28, and the plan is to turn it into a park. There's another faction that I tend to agree with that, hey, we should look into building housing. We should look into having revenue streams to fund the park. And so you have a lot of very vocal people going at, this thing right now. So it feels maybe not divisive in the way that, MAGA feels divisive, but it is, you still have to share your city with your neighbors, and you have to work together, and you have to figure out how to get stuff done. But, here you can meet people, you can talk to people, you can have, as we have right now, we have a representative, or a deputy of a representative in Eric's apartment talking about transit, and I think that's like the beauty of, where we are and what we're doing.
Well, on a kind of different subject, you mentioned a couple times growing up in Los Angeles. I was wondering, where did you start in Los Angeles? Where have you lived? And when you went to UCLA, did you live in Westwood or?
Yeah, so growing up, I grew up in Linwood, Southgate, Downey, and then
our first Southeast Los Angeles County person.
And then the small business my grandfather started was in downtown in the wholesale district. So that's usually where I spent most of my weekends. And went to college on the west side, lived in Westwood, did my grad work at that other campus at USC. So I was a Bruin behind enemy lines. And during that time, I was commuting by bike from Downey to USC, take the train. I would shower at the gym, take the train and go to an internship during the day, go back to class, and then take transit back home. So it was very much a multimodal couple of years there for a good chunk. And then have been in East Hollywood for coming up on 10 years now. So it's been really lovely to kind of have a different corner of the city. I get out to the southeast part of the county relatively often to visit family, but this is kind of my little nook.
I'm not sure why, but it seems like there's I don't know. Again, I always qualify, I could be wrong, but it seems like there's a lot of transit advocacy going on in Southeast Los Angeles right now. I hear about I know that there's an open streets event in Bell on May the 4th, I think, and then I think I saw there was one somewhere else, and I just hear I hear a lot of bike advocacy stuff in that part of town.
Yeah, I actually helped start up the Downey Bicycle Coalition back then, and I think that has really, that was one small outpost in the area, but Southeast riders are really big. I think the electeds in Cudahy are really progressive and really focused on transit. I forget the mayor's name there. Going up to the SGV, the mayor that just recently went to the assembly.
From Alhambra?
Yes.
Sasha,
there you go.
Renee Perez? Something like that.
Yes, you're much more connected to the local politics than I am. There's been this real kind of driver or resurgence and kind of energy around transit, around housing, around affordability, and I think it's going to be really interesting to watch. And I'm hoping that the Gateway COG kind of is able to continue to play this role of bringing folks together. And obviously they do the strategic planning work, but how do they kind of bring together these community-based organizations and all these other initiatives to kind of provide a little bit more of a holistic vision to the COG? Because I think that's always been a challenge of being a county of 88 jurisdictions.
88 cities. So people that know that I do maps, I think the first regional map I did was of Southeast Los Angeles because it's probably the most obscure corner of the county for a lot of people, even though it's relatively urbanized. I think people have a sense of what the Antelope Valley is like. They have a sense of what South Los Angeles is like, San Gabriel Valley. But then you tell someone like Santa Fe Springs or Cudahy and Hawaiian Gardens are what are these places? And they're not Orange County. They're not the San Gabriel Valley. They're not South Los Angeles. They're the gateway cities, but even that's not a tag that most people recognize. But yeah, I don't know. They're so overlooked, and then it seems like there's all this stuff happening there. I think that's interesting.
And I think the culture is really different, right? The kind of the selling of the alternatives to car is kind of a challenging sell, right? My family all thinks I'm really weird. Why are you living in the city? Why aren't you driving everywhere?
It's kind of famous. It's a lot of GI housing built, and after World War II. And it's this is where our local version of suburbia was this is, the heart of it is arterial roads and tract housing where all the houses look fairly similar and everybody has a 2-car garage and everyone cleans it on, Sunday or whatever. And what's the DJ Waldy book? I have it on my shelf somewhere. Holy Land. It's about growing up in Lakewood, and it's a fascinating read. It's a very easy read. I read it while walking, and he's car free too. So,
just to further sell anyone on maintenance and cleaning for your modes of getting around, I can clean my Vespa with a bottle of Windex and a microfiber towel. I can clean my bike with a bottle of Windex and a microfiber towel. I don't need the hose. I don't need to dedicate an entire Sunday to doing it. Truly, time saved.
My poor bike is wondering when I'm going to bring out the Windex and microfiber.
Yeah. The only time I clean my bike is when I'm taking it to the bike shop because I don't want to get shamed. And then, I'm sure they can tell, oh, how often do you grease the chain? Just every time you come here and that's it? Yeah, pretty much.
I think a lot of it with me is, because I paint all of my stuff religiously, or like I'll notice the spot like, oh, I didn't quite splatter that right. So I'm always just adding little paint splashes to my bike. So I think that's motivation for me to keep it relatively clean. Same with the one wheel, which is like an electric skateboard that I take around. Those things take a beating. So my paint job on the wooden foot pads gets scraped off as I've been curb nudging and going at it. So I have to periodically, repaint it. I cannot rest if I have a stock looking, object.
Well, I have to let you know that the red Linus downstairs, it has this very special scratch because it was ridden in a Colgate commercial by I can't remember her name. Not Regis and Kathy Lee. Who's the one that was after Kathy Lee? Oh man, sorry. But she rode it in an ad for Colgate because it's a red bicycle, and then she got a scratch on it, so they had to sell it discount, and that's why I got it for a good price. So I can't get rid of that blemish because someone whose name I can't remember.
I got my motorcycle helmet from a commercial warehouse clean out. There was, they just had they were doing a motorcycle commercial for something, so we got a bunch of helmets, got a bunch of locks, got a cell phone light stand that a commercial was just going to throw out. So we're like, hey,
crazy.
I'm going to need your Facebook marketplace.
Yeah, seriously. I need to get into the Silver Lake Buy Nothing group because I don't know. I've had a couple neighbors move out recently, and this is nothing to do with transit, but just seeing the stuff they throw away, it's like working computers. It's like, I just don't want to move stuff. I'm like, wow.
Ties into sustainability. It's
yeah. No, it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
And I do think that we don't talk enough about the environmental aspect of active and mass transit too. Being that's very rarely, I feel like, promoted as like, this is a good reason to do this. Like, it's not spewing microplastics all over the place.
Yeah, and I guess from a marketing perspective, right? I'm always thinking about what resonates with people. Yeah. And I know that if I start saying like, oh, it's good for the environment.
It's too big for a lot of people. Yeah. It's like, it's for the polar bears. Ride a bike. Like, huh?
Folks just shut down. But if I frame something as like, oh, hey, we're going to Comic-Con, let's take, or we're going to WonderCon, let's take Metrolink. It'll cost $8 instead of, $50 for gas, $30 for parking, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Great, let's do it.
And it's also fun.
Yeah. And that's so important, right? Whenever you're talking about framing, whether, it's how are we going to get to Comic-Con in San Diego or a bike lane along Hollywood Boulevard, right? It's how are we framing it to different audiences and making it resonate with them, right? Because, there is always those growing pains, and how do we manage those growing pains and help people see the vision and then hopefully be part of enjoying that?
I hope that like kids are, I feel like kids, I'm child free, but I feel like kids have influence on their parents, and they like, big construction stuff. And then it's like, I want to take a train. I feel like kids want to take trains. Kids want to ride bikes. Kids don't want to sit in the back of the car, but
my buddy Nam in San Diego, he lives right by the Orange Line in San Diego. So whenever I go down to visit, I'll, train down, walk over, blah, blah, blah. And his son knows that I'm a train guy. So every time I come by, Alex has a different toy train. Kyle, train. So I have a couple of trains from Alex now. That's hanging out behind my desk. Talking about, I guess maybe moving back to like this district, like District 13. I work in Atwater, right? And since I've been taking the bus, biking, transiting to work and exploring the neighborhood, rather than come home, drive home, come home, drive home. I think on the podcast, I need to apologize for maybe being a little like anti-Atwater when I but when I was mainly driving, like it was just get to work, get home, get to work, get home. And since I've had, what am I going to do for an hour while I'm waiting for the bus or whatever? So I've gotten to walk around the neighborhood, exploring some diners, like Armenian food. Oh my God. Astounding. And looking, I think for a while too, I've been feeling a little like disconnected from the art scene out here. It's tough when you work in
there's some hidden stuff over there. There's like live theater in Atwater.
Yeah. Well, speaking of theater, my friend is lighting a production of Bat Boy that's going on at the Open Fist Theater, which is this absurd musical based on the Weekly World News tabloid character. And this
real life character.
Yeah, real life.
Only the World Weekly News covered.
Yeah, of course. And there's this like little theater that's right across the street from like a warehouse where I spend all of my time. Like, it's right here. And I also learned too that in Atwater there's Zebulon, and my favorite jazz guitarist I thought he was a Chicago guy because the band I know him from is a Chicago band. Turns out he's been living in LA for years and just shows at Zebulon all the time. So like I can get out of work and go walk to see Jeff Parker do an improvised jazz quartet for a night. This is amazing.
I will tell you, most people would not consider Zebulon to be Atwater because it's the west side of the river, and Atwater's on the east side. So you could argue about whether it's Frogtown or Silver Lake, but it's all that, you know, the lines blur together. As a map maker, they're
Transition areas.
Yeah. But maybe that's a good segue to kind of, because not everyone will know what CD13 is. So maybe we can talk about like what areas that serves a little bit.
Sure. So I think, let me see if I can remember my mental map. We've got obviously Atwater Village, Glassell Park, hop over the river into Elysian Valley / Frogtown, depending on how you call it. Mm-hmm. We split Elysian Park with District 1 and Councilmember Eunices Hernandez. Have a good chunk of Echo Park, which again is split with Council District 1. Most of Silver Lake, East Hollywood, historic Filipino town. I think our
Los Feliz.
Los Feliz is actually our
that's
boundary.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So that's a split with District 4, as is, rest of Silver Lake. So I believe Hollywood Boulevard, and then, there's a line that goes all the way to over the reservoir. So the reservoir is split about like the southern 2/3
Right.
are ours, and the northern third is District 4.
The north end of Westlake, is that like
North end, we're
like Filipino town?
Rampart Hill, Filipino town, and then go out to Larchmont and kind of the historic squares in Hollywood. And
It's a pretty big area.
They're all giant. Yeah.
It's huge. I think footprint wise, we might be one of the smaller ones because it is one of the densest. I think we've got to be the densest outside of CD 14, which is obviously includes downtown, and perhaps CD1, which maybe
Koreatown.
Yeah. So we're one of the densest, and I think I talk about this with my colleagues. We have such a great transit network that is connected. We've got Vermont, Santa Monica Boulevard, Sunset Boulevard, Hollywood Boulevard. So we've got this great backbone network of bus services. And so we're really excited to see what HLA kind of shakes out in terms of investments and prioritization for our transit riders. I think there's a real opportunity to lead via example in District 13.
Do you know roughly how many people live in CD13?
I believe it's about 250,000.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's the number I had in mind. So I think, which is, that's like the largest city in probably 40, states or something like that's like Des Moines size.
It's larger than the second largest or third largest city in the county. I think it's LA, Long Beach, and then we get much smaller.
Yeah.
We have some listener questions submitted that we can dig into.
A bunch were about Hollywood Boulevard bike lanes. And so I guess just any kind of updates about that. But, people had concerns about illegally parked cars on it, the bollard maintenance, the bollard material, just anything you can say about, I think that's like probably, well, and also I'm just curious about people's reactions because I've gone to some meetings where I used it. I rode those to go over to the last Ciclavia, and I like having protected, especially parking protected bike lanes. But then I've been to other meetings where the guy who stands up and says, I'm an avid cyclist, but, and you're like, okay, here we go. And then he'll say like, I won't even ride on a street that has bike lanes because I'm a vehicle. And like, okay, I don't know if you're actually an avid cyclist or what, but, or if you just want to discourage people who aren't as, militaristically.
Minor interjection, if I may, because I was really excited about this. I spent a weekend in the Bay Area, in the city, just get away for a little bit, took the Starlight back down, got off of the train to catch the 94. And as I'm walking up, I think it's First Street or Hill Street, whatever the street is, that's by the Redwood, I noticed, I don't know if there was an event there or something, if there were a bunch of plastic lane dividers that were put up over the bike lane going down that street. I think because there was a concert over the weekend, but they made it a makeshift protected bike lane. And as I'm walking up, I'm just thinking like, wow, it is so easy to protect a bike lane. You just drop these little plastic things in and hey, you're safe.
I love it. love the real life experience. Eric, I always chuckle when someone, kind of that person of, why do we need bike lanes? I'm a vehicle. And in my youth, and when I was a very active bike racer, sure, I would have agreed with that. But really...
had friends that have taken that point of view. It's like, I'm legally defined, and it's like,
But I don't weigh 2 tons, luckily. No. And so, we really do need to make things safer. And I think the concept of 8-280 that really kind of emerged during Vision Zero, and that concept is that infrastructure needs to be safe enough for somebody, whether they're the age 8 and a kid, or an older individual in their 80s can ride safely, right? And I think that's what people miss. And people, that are used to maybe racing down the street and keeping up with cars, forget that maybe the average bicycle speed is 10 to 12 miles per hour, which is not much lower than what cars do in traffic, to be very clear, right? People are like, oh, you're only going 12 miles per hour. It's like, how fast do you think you're going racing from stoplight to stoplight? But that's, a slight detour. In short, to talk about Hollywood Boulevard, my goodness, what a success it's been. I think as an office, we've been really overjoyed, and I think the council member has been thrilled with the reception, largely positive. The council member, Soto Martinez, has been really diligent about making sure that I'm working with folks that are expressing frustrations or have an issue along the bike lane so we can troubleshoot. And I think we've been really proactive about working directly with either businesses or other residents that kind of identify, hey, there's a challenge with this driveway, or there's a backup that happens during this school hours. So I'm able to kind of put on my old transportation consultant hat and help troubleshoot with LADOT. And I think that's something we're really proud of. In general, we've gotten so many positive emails. I think at a ratio of like 2 to 1, positive to negative, which
good. That's reassuring, because it is a lot of times the negative voices that are the loudest and also claim to speak for everyone. They say like, I represent the vast majority. And I've told people before, like, well, by my math, you represent 1%, but
Yes.
But I'll also just add another personal anecdote. When the lanes were first going in, it was pretty quick. It was like over a week or a few days or something. Yeah. Like the first couple of days, I was like, man, cars are slow. People are if this doesn't work right, people are gonna revolt and rip these out and recall the council person and like put heads on spikes. But then, seriously, like 3 days later, I was like, oh, it's normal now. People figured it out. Like maybe if you're in a hurry, go down. I don't know. I was happy to see that it sorted itself out pretty quickly.
And I think typically with these projects, it takes about 6 to 9 months for things to shake out, for people to be like, okay, I'm going to find my alternative route, or I'm going to do something else, or I'm going to take the bus or take a scooter instead, right? So we're seeing that happen. We're about coming up on a year from implementation. So we're seeing that kind of reaction and that kind of the dust settle, if you will. I think I also just want to take a moment to extend our gratitude for LADOT. LADOT, it did probably one of their most extensive engagement efforts. They were working with community-based organizations and had literal boots on the ground, people walking up and down the corridor, talking to folks at grocery stores, at bus stops, attending events. Several thousand mailers were sent out. So we had a pair of town hall meetings as well. So we really did do and support LADOT in engaging as many people as possible. And, as you mentioned, in a representative democracy, you're not always going to get everybody, but we can make the effort to get as many people there. And then once it's done, making sure that we're still holding space for people to share their frustrations and figure out how we might troubleshoot. And so I think that's something we're really proud of.
Can you define LADOT and how they work with the city, what they do, what they are for someone who might not know?
Sure. So LADOT is the Los Angeles Department of Transportation. They are charged with, doing a lot of the striping, the design for how the streets look between the curbs. They do programmatic work like, managing the taxi system or the shared bike scooter system. They're obviously also in charge of parking citywide in any public owned facilities or on the street, right? And so they're working on kind of the management of the parking system as an entirety. They're also charged with, in collaboration with other departments such as Streets LA, implementing, bike lanes, et cetera, per the mobility plan. I think one of the other projects or programs that LADOT, I love to elevate for LADOT is the Bus Speed and Reliability Program, which is a partnership between LADOT and Metro, which helps implement peak hour bus lanes. There's one on La Brea, there's the ones on Wilshire. We're looking to see some on Sunset Boulevard between Havenhurst, which is more or less the boundary with West Hollywood and Vermont a little bit later this year. So there's a lot of that work coming. And so LADOT does a lot, and they do a lot without a lot of recognition.
Well, they do the Dash and Commuter Express buses, right?
Those as well. They do a lot.
Which actually, I was wondering how has I'll call it a street upgrade because when people complain about something that happens on like Hollywood Boulevard, they're like, seriously, you've reduced it to 2 lanes? And I'm like, well, no, there's 2 bike lanes, 2 car storage lanes, a center turn lane, 2 general traffic lanes. There's actually more lanes on it now. It's like they've just been rearranged. It's not just one kind of customer that's allowed to sit at the table anymore. But how has it affected bus travel times? Because it does feel a bit slower, although honestly not that much slower.
Yeah, I think during the peak hour. So I've been out and observing Hollywood Boulevard during entire days, and really during the rush hour, as you would expect, is where we get a little bit of slowdown. We haven't heard from Metro any like huge concerns. We're also working on the segment that would go west of Gower, right, to La Brea, which would be phase 2 of that Access to Hollywood project. And so we're trying to figure out how we might be able to accelerate bus service through that area to kind of make up for some of the delays in East Hollywood.
Might we ever just close part of Hollywood Boulevard?
Certainly a conversation that's been happening for years now.
Yeah,
prior
we
to
close
this
it a lot.
office, so
it was closed yesterday for
Yeah.
Songkran in Thai Town. I went by and I was like, I was happy to see it closed, even though I was making deliveries. It's always heartening. There was that, and there was the Off Sunset Festival. I was like, there's same time.
And
I was
the traffic
like,
didn't implode.
No. I was like, it felt pretty nice yesterday, and I was like, there was Off Sunset Festivals, like the leather communities festival between Rough Trade and the Gauntlet 2.
legal.
Eagle LA. Yeah, right. Sorry, I'm dating myself. But yeah, so lots of chilly people in tiny leather shorts and straps and stuff. And then a Thai New Year festival happening just down the road a little bit.
Diversity of LA, right?
Yeah. I know you love it.
If we're talking about closing lanes, this is a great time to bring up submitted question from our friend and
Friend of the show.
Danny Vega. And Danny lives in Echo Park, and he wants to know, when are we going to make Sunset Boulevard 2 bus lanes only and make it the greatest pedestrian boulevard in the entire world?
I will say that those are ongoing conversations. let me put my work hat back on. I will say that our conversations with the LADOT from the get-go were, let's make Hollywood Boulevard happen. We are currently working on phase 2 that will get us from Gower to La Brea.
What's the timeline of that roughly?
We are probably looking at implementation hopefully in about a year to 18 months. There's been a couple of, and we can come back to this, but there's been a couple of delays as we understand the implications of HLA, a couple of ADA guidelines, et cetera. So, but the good thing is it is moving forward. Yeah. So we're just a little bit delayed as things are kind of reshuffling a wee bit.
It'll be too late for listeners, but today you can give comment on the new budget that dropped at City Hall at 4, I believe.
Please do.
Yeah. I might go down there.
I don't think I can get this edited.
Can you get
time.
it out in an hour?
That's a lot even for me.
One more question I have about the bike lanes or Hollywood Boulevard, because I have, some of the plastic bollards are pretty beaten up, and that happens whenever there's plastic bollards. And I was watching the Red Desert at the Los Feliz 3 not too long ago, and I was like, whoa, metal bollards in the 60s in Italy. And, what are the, I'm sure you weigh like the budget stuff and also, but the functionality, and could it ever be upgraded so that there's like, instead of having bollards, there's like a raised sort of island or something that might have a tree in it or something?
Hold up, term define. What is a bollard?
Oh yeah.
A bollard are those about 18 to 24 inch, I think they're 18 inches, white little posts that hug our protected bike lanes in Hollywood and all over the city. So
Okay. I've just been calling them sticky dudes.
let's add it to the glossary.
Yeah. There's flexible delineators and there's bollards.
So I think one of the big reasons why those are used is because emergency vehicles can roll over them, right? Obviously, emergency vehicles are not the only ones that can roll over them, as we can see through some of our pancaked bollards. But the city is looking at alternatives, and some they're called zebra bumpers, I believe. So they're a little bit lower, but they're much harsher. If you're driving and you were to hit it, you're going to feel like you're in a bumper car. So the city is looking at alternatives and alternative vendors, especially as Vision Zero projects move forward. I believe there's a motion out there in the ether on hardening our protected bicycle facilities. And so that's really something we're going to want to look at for Hollywood Boulevard in the future. And so that's kind of where we're at right now.
Are the zebra bumpers, because I know when you go over on Hollywood over the 101, there's a little bit more curb looking, they look like the things that are at the end of a parking stop to stop you from going into the wall, but like a little bit lower.
Yeah, I think those might be some of them. I think they also have some either on Spring Street or Main Street in downtown.
Okay.
So I think LADOT has started to roll them out in some locations. I also wanted to just circle back to another component. I know we were talking about enforcement of the bike lanes and parking. And so Santa Monica last year did a pilot in accordance with AB 361, which allows for camera enforcement of bike lanes. Obviously, we've been seeing the successes of using cameras for bus lane enforcement with Metro on some key corridors. And so that's something that we're working on in motion to introduce, to ask LADOT to look at how do we use cameras in Los Angeles in the same way that we're using them for bus lanes, but to protect our bike lanes as well.
And it would generate some revenue. Maybe.
Sounds like something that might be needed these days, right?
Yeah, maybe if we framed it as like for every person that gets ticketed for parking in a bike lane or that it saves an animal at the shelter. I mean, I don't know if that's true, but we can say it and then ask for forgiveness if we're wrong.
I am not saying that. That's all you are.
Yeah.
I guess I've been thinking lately, looking at a lot of posts that show up on the Facebook group fans of LA Metro and Our Car Independent LA. You see a lot of people get up in arms about this project is going to cost X number of billions. It's $1 billion a mile, blah,
It's a
blah, blah.
boondoggle. That's the only time that word gets trotted out in the American English, dialect.
When it just seems like from a marketing perspective, it kind of boggles my mind that people get so hung up on an initial price tag. We don't advertise how much economic activity the lines are going to create. Looking at the K-Line North Extension project, relative to the cost of that thing, you are generating so much economic activity from that line. And the thing to do, or that makes sense to me, is to focus on in your headline, hey, K-Line North will create XYZ number of jobs, will create this much amount of activity. Like, that seems like a much wiser selling point than it's going to cost $16 billion. Like, you don't say that when you're, I don't know.
Talking about the police? That wasn't Rogelio, that was Eric.
I think maybe a more practical thing is like, I need to start an IRA. Like, you're not saying like, oh, it's going to cost blah, 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 when in fact, like, hey, you're making a lot of money on this down the line. It seems like it's just a subtle shift in conversation or how you pitch it that I think could have profound consequences.
Yeah, we also always talk about transit though, and like the revenue and how much this costs and how much this loses. And like, I'm not voicing a position about the police and the budget, but we don't say that about them. We don't say, oh, they're not bringing in any revenue. We don't, because we don't pay every time we call 911. We don't pay ever.
Can you imagine if we taxed bribes?
just a modest split,
Well, I another question. This is actually kind of one of mine that, because I'm always amazed. So, I don't know if they have a name, but there are the new bus stops that are designed by, I believe, Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, SOM, and that I think are, it's with Transito and Vector who do the advertising, I think. And they have like real-time arrival displays and screens, and I've seen a few tagged, but I've only seen the screens broken on one time, and I'm just surprised because the fact of the matter is that like lots of there is lots of vandalism, and I don't know. I can go into how I feel like that's because we as a society don't think of this as our home and our property and stuff like that. But
Americans love to break shit.
We do. Well, I had a friend that in Korea, he was trying to explain to someone why, he was like, oh, and in the US, like people would key their tags into the windows of the train by now, and the Koreans were like, why? And he's like, I don't know. It's just what we do. We just scratch everything up and break it. I don't know why. But yeah, how do they keep them so maintained?
Transito, I believe that's part of their contract is to be out there.
To just be out there constantly.
Yeah.
Because I do feel like, I remember when e-scooters started appearing on the scene and there was so much like, I'm going to kick over every single one and throw them in the trash. But I do feel like after a while, it just becomes like, maybe I won't do that anymore. Like it becomes like a full-time job. Like they keep repairing this and I keep smashing it, but I'm getting tired of it.
I will also say that possibly again, I'm guessing here, but my hunch is that the way that Transito is managing is actually a lesson from programs like the Shared Mobility Program. The original pilot really kind of, after that first wave of scooters on the street, DOT put together a very thoughtful pilot project. And it was focused on, well, what are the metrics that we need and what are the response times that we need to hold these businesses accountable, right? So, that included using that MDS data so that if a report was submitted via MyLA 311, I think Bird's response time is like 30 minutes for either moving something out of the right of way or fixing it, getting things out of areas where they're not supposed to be. And so that's been kind of a positive lesson that has come out from working with some of the vendors.
Things moving in the right direction. Let's see. Someone asked about, and this was a very long question, the city's park block pilot program, which was something, a lot of listeners will probably have heard of the Superillas in Barcelona, where they close blocks, and for whatever reason they translate Superillas, which means super islands, to super blocks is what they usually call it in English. So it's like effectively closing areas to cars by making the speed limit really low and then putting like street furniture in the streets and stuff like that. And I guess there was discussion about doing that in CD13 at one point.
Yeah, so about a year ago, we were, there was a pocket of community redevelopment dollars that needed to be utilized, and we thought that might be a really innovative way to use it and kind of bring some open space to a part of the district that is park poor, right? Mm-hmm. And so a lot of it is, like you mentioned, Eric, really using the design, using open space and speed limits to kind of reduce the through traffic. Or cut through traffic that we see all over the place. Unfortunately, we weren't able to secure the city resources in terms of bodies to do the actual work. And so this is kind of something that is on our radar, and we're hoping to revisit in the next year or two again.
Yeah, because this is just my editorializing again. It does seem like there are certain areas of Los Angeles like East Hollywood is very dense and well served by transit, and downtown, Westlake, Koreatown, where it seems like, it would be nice if cars weren't on every street, But like as someone who's a delivery guy, it would not impact me negatively. It would make for everything better.
And it's really those areas where the grid is a very consistent grid, which would be great candidates, right? So It's definitely something we're looking to explore with community members in the coming
years. And all those
years.
regions kind of are like, even though Los Angeles is, famously not really a city with one center, all of those like dense, there are a bunch of dense areas that are very close to each other. Yes. Like, Westlake's between Koreatown and downtown. So it's like and then East Hollywood's just right by that. So, yeah. This is a really specific one, but which I was generally going to like avoid ones that are about specific streets, but maybe we can ask about the Aaron Street question about preferential parking or permit-only parking on Aaron Street.
So that question was submitted by a friend as a joke. So.
Why are you against it? But then the other question was, the serious question was, someone asked, when are we getting bike lanes on Fletcher Drive? Mitchell Farrell blocked them, and since then we have heard nothing, which I do believe that there was it was called for to have, I think he said like, no, we want to remove. Well, it's a famously awful intersection. I'll also just roll in with my own question, because we have these several intersections in this district where like 5 streets come together angles, and like, why do we hate roundabouts so much?
Yeah. Let's do it.
And I did ask someone, who a friend of mine who grew up in Los Angeles, why he hates roundabouts, and he was like, you just don't know what you're doing as you're coming up to them in your car. You have to like slow down and pay attention. I'm like, I think that sounds like
the point. Yeah. That's the point.
You can't just blow through them and hit the egg sculptures. And Glassell Park has these like egg looking things, and a car drove through them. And I said, leave the car there as part of the sculpture. It's like living art piece. What's going on with those bike lanes in winter? Why do we hate roundabouts?
Yeah, so I will say, going back to Measure HLA, and so we'll see some sort of prioritization there. We know that a key component of the prioritization is going to be what is on the mobility plan, and then also what is the pavement condition. I'm sure if you've ridden your bike on that stretch, there's going to be something that needs to be done sooner than later. And so, again, I think we're going to hold off and see what the HLA prioritization lists look like. In terms of that intersection, we did work really closely with Council District 4 and Councilmember Rahman's office to ask for a report from BOE about what it would take to fix that intersection, at least add improved crosswalks or crossing opportunities. We also explored like closing one of those legs, but apparently closing it actually doesn't solve or create any additional connectivity. So the good thing is that we have a ballpark estimate, assuming that the project is even feasible. As a feasibility study was not done. And so I think the next step here is again, we're going to be leaning in on the CIP, right? Which is the CIP is going to help identify a broad array of projects, transportation and otherwise. We also know that LADOT is doing a revision to their Vision Zero work. And so that's going to help us, again, figure out where do we need to prioritize resources citywide. We anticipated that intersection, given its proximity to a Class 1 bicycle facility in the LA River bike path, will score relatively well. And then we'll see where we land. But I think that intersection, the bike lanes to Fletcher, they don't exist in a silo. It's very much a comprehensive approach, not only in terms of access for Silver Lake or to and from the river, but also how are we looking at things holistically as a city? And it'll be interesting to see where that falls.
Yeah, we did have some questions about access to the river too, because as they didn't specify what neighborhood, because I was thinking like Frogtown has pretty good access to the river, but then Atwater doesn't really. There's no bike trail on that side of the river. And then over here, the easiest way for me to get to the river most quickly is to go down Glendale Boulevard and then look for a hole in the fence off the 5 freeway exit and to go onto the bike trail, or go down to Fletcher, which is, kind of nightmarish.
Or, tunnel under the fence like an escaping dog.
I will say there are always holes in the fence. They're cut by people, but that's it's not the best way to when I'm trying to recommend to somebody else like who's visiting, like, here's how you get there. Look for a hole on the freeway off ramp. They're like, I don't like what you're saying. But I know we had talked about I had talked with CD4 about, because I think that's CD4, about having more access to the, and it's not that they're not unaware of that either. It's like there were questions about the Victory Memorial Bridge too, which is a locally infamous bridge that Glendale and Hyperion, it's kind of a Franken bridge. It used to involve trains. The sidewalks are very narrow or non-existent, or no crosswalks at parts of it. But it's a long process. I think that's maybe the short answer, or the incoherently rambling.
No, and I'll just go ahead and add, since we're talking about it, is the Hyperion Bridge is definitely a project that we're very mindful of. It's something that our office, or Councilmember Soto Martinez's office, as well as Councilmember Rahman's office, have really been reaching out to BOE, and we've been very engaged and very curious about when this project will be constructed. But we're also really curious about, and frankly, have been very frank with our city partners, or the partners in the city family, of we really want to see bicycle facilities on this future iteration of the Hyperion Bridge. And so it seems that message has been received. We anticipate that will continue to be the case. And so now we're just waiting to see when that contract is awarded and how things move forward.
I just walked over the other night. I thought of you because I went to this. It was a show called Obsessed, and it was kind of like nerdy comedy in the basement of
the wine shop.
Bueno Vino, yeah,
yes.
But it's called something else now. Nico's?
Yeah.
Is that Nico's?
Yeah.
Okay. And then so they had a friend of mine, V, founder of the Octavia Lab, was doing a performance about her obsession with mid-century modern chairs. And my friend Jackie asked if I wanted to get a ride over there. And I really would prefer to walk than if it's easy, because it's like a less than 10-minute walk from here. But I did do it, but yeah, I went up and over so that I'm not like shimmying along the very like narrow curb, which it must be a sidewalk because there are plaques there that you're like, if you want to read, that's the only place.
Or if
to
you're
stand.
Stuck in traffic, you can.
Or if you are the traffic,
leave your car on the bridge.
yeah. Just put on your blinkers and then like, what was this? So then I went over and then I get, I get to Atwater and there's no crosswalk. The sidewalk just ends and you have to just run across like a couple lanes that are the on ramp to the 5, and it's just like, man, this is again, it's kind of like the vehicular cyclist. It's like, I will do this, but then other people will not. That's why they're saying, hey, do you want a ride? Because they could walk too, but they're going to drive because they don't want to have to run across freeway on ramps.
So talking about feasibility studies, I had a conversation with a friend recently that was his argument, and he's very conservative, was, well, how do you know that those numbers are actually going to be right? Or how do you know how any of that stuff works? And I thought for a second, wait, I actually don't know how a feasibility study works.
I think it really depends on how far you zoom out, right? I think, probably when I started my career, things were very focused on a specific corridor and you just looked at that corridor. Modeling now has evolved in a way where you're probably looking at the whole network and you're really figuring out, what is the capacity of this street? How many people are using it now? And what's the capacity in the entire network, right? Because as Eric was mentioning, that for those first couple of days of the Hollywood Boulevard being redesigned, all the same people that were used to driving on it were still going on it. And it took a couple of days, weeks, perhaps a couple months for folks to find their alternative routes, right? And so Sunset is one, Franklin is another. So it's largely modeling. And then once things are on the ground, I'm from my professional background, I'm very much a fan of troubleshooting, and a project is not done when you implement it. That is like major part one. And then after that is, how do we troubleshoot? And that's like the really fun kind of like nitty gritty things. Speaking of troubleshooting, so what is like day-to-day troubleshooting work? What does your day-to-day role look like when you're out in the field? Sure. So I lean very heavily on our field team, and they are very much the front door to our office. They are the first people that people meet. We've got a fantastic group of 4 field deputies and 2 case managers that they are picking up the phones, responding to people day in and day out as quickly as humanly possible.
Can I jump in and just say, like, how many phone calls and emails do you get a day, or like in a period? Because I think nobody has any idea. That's not in city government. So sometimes people are like, why didn't they ever reply?
Our field team is at any given day gets hundreds of emails.
I don't think people would imagine that, because it's like, why have I not heard a reply? I wrote this morning,
And as somebody who came from the private sector and was always very proud of having my inbox at 0 at the end of the day with my clients, it's very different.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more challenging these days. So, but
I did hear it was better before email. Like someone was telling Mehmet from CD4, like, I used to reply to all the letters that would get sent to me. It was like, yeah, but they weren't like electronic. They weren't coming in. People had to like go to write a letter and drop it.
And I think it really speaks to challenge. I think a big part of this job is also just holding space for people to be frustrated or share with their experience, and then figure out like, okay, well, how can we help and redirect to the right place? And how do we gently say, we might not be able to help specifically, but we might be able to do something else about this issue. And I think that's a large part of my role in this office, right? Like one is interfacing with LADOT and BOE and other departments that are working on infrastructure projects. The other is supporting our field team in making sure that they are able to provide responses to community members, or just be very, very clear with folks about what may or may not be an option on a specific block, a specific intersection, et cetera. So on the flip side of that, from your capacity as a city, as a deputy, what can, in a perfect world, what sort of things can
we the people, what can we do to better interface with the council, with the city government, with the folks that are doing the work?
Yeah, I think three things. One is on an individual thing. I'm a huge fan of My LA 311, right? Mm-hmm. For like small things, that's your biggest tool. It's your best interface with the government for specific services.
Can I just have a question about My 311? Because I have used it and I've gotten responses, but I haven't used the new version. I know like the app just got updated, but I always just feel like it will say like your response has been noted and here's the number of your thing, but you don't know if action was taken.
So
it's kind of like, did they just delete it, or are they going to do something?
So that's part of the revision, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And before that revision was rolled out a couple weeks ago, we were always like, let us know what your service request number is so we can go ahead and make that ask, right? But I believe the new revision includes a little bit details on timeline and also like what was or was not done.
Nice.
And if something is not able to be done, why?
Yeah.
Because it turns out it's really frustrating to hear no and just get that no. It's a little bit easier to process if you get a little bit of transparency, right? And so that's something that our office.
Yeah, we determined that this isn't feasible, blah, blah. That's better than just like, okay, got it. Like it didn't happen. Like, oh.
To go back to Kyle's question, I think, obviously leveraging My LA 301, and I often will tell neighbors, just say, go ham, make sure you're all submitting the same thing, make sure it is known. And on that line of thinking, it really is coalition building, right? And I think the neighborhood councils do a great job of being a space for potential coalition building. But I think there's different community-based organizations that do that work, or even neighborhoods that kind of do that from the ground up. And, we work to kind of help support that as available. I would also say, I think the transportation committee for the Silver Lake Neighborhood Council was really great. They spent about a year really culling all the concerns that they heard transportation wise, and put it together in a really great document that was, a local, quote unquote plan of transportation needs and challenges in Silver Lake. And that's been really helpful because it gives us something to share with the Department of Transportation and say, hey, in this neighborhood, let us know when some of these things might be doable. And then also let's give that credit to the Silver Lake Neighborhood Council Transportation Committee, because I think that is a really powerful tool of, condensing all the different frustrations that there may be, or all the different issues and opportunities for improvement, and putting them on one paper, and we can point to and say, hey, what are we doing in Silver Lake, and what can we move along?
And that seems a lot more focused than, everyone just problem dumping at a city council meeting. In terms of just being able to digest all of that information, that's cool.
Which again is valid.
Yeah, valid for sure. City council meetings feel cathartic to me. Like, oh, you get to voice your concerns, right? Or at the very least, the hamster wheel in my head is turning like, oh, interesting. How can we make some, just from a, biking advocacy thing, what kind of things can we make to better communicate this information? That is really, really cool.
Sometimes you get to voice your concerns. Sometimes they tell you, all right, we've heard enough public comment. Thank you for spending 4 hours of your day coming down here and not speaking.
See, I like with public comments, because you're usually waiting for so long, it gives me a lot of time to write my comment, revise my comment.
Oh my God, that's what I'm doing constantly up until the last
get it down to a tight 30 seconds. So even if if they're giving you 2 minutes, they cut you down to a minute, be nice to them, give them 30 seconds, give them 15 seconds. I find that folks tend to appreciate that brevity.
You know what? I think everybody appreciates the brevity, but also just the kindness and directness of the comment. I'm sure if you've been at council, you're familiar with some.
No one ever says to themselves, I wish they kind of went more into it in that question and like could have gone on. Although I did actually, I at the last neighborhood council outreach meeting, I said, I would love it. This was my idea. I was like, I would love it if we had our meetings at the library, because then we have a hard out. Yeah. So we're like, I'm sorry, as much as I'd like to let you go on for 10 minutes about something that you could sum up in 30 seconds, we don't have time because we got to be out of here. And then someone said, I actually like the long meetings for various reasons. And I was like, okay, well, then you like being bitten by mosquitoes and like, I don't know, we're different.
I used to be involved in a writers group before I moved out here, and I haven't really been doing much writing since then. So the little exercise of writing a concise comment for city council meetings is it scratches a similar itch that when I was part of a poetry group did.
It's like haiku.
Yeah, right. It's like haiku.
Not an epic poem. We don't want to hear we don't want to hear Paradise Lost. We just want to hear a little haiku about.
I mean, I did once write an epic haiku when I lived in the country. My neighbors had a bunch of ducks that like lived by our apartment buildings, like parking lot, I guess you would say. It was like the one apartment building in a town of 300 people. And so I wrote an epic poem that is 10 pages of haiku based on these ducks, if they were duck dragons. You go a little stir crazy when you live in the country.
It is true. I can attest that too. I this total, like an aside. I remember my first winter in rural Iowa. I asked my brother, like, does it ever sound like the pigs are saying your name? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, okay, good. So we're both losing our mind in the same way.
Is there anything we haven't covered yet?
Yeah, I'm trying to kind of consolidate some of them. One was about, could we make Sunset Boulevard have a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit? That way we could have al fresco dining on Sunset. But I would just also like to know about al fresco more anyway, because that, like, dining outside is one of my favorite things about Los Angeles, and one of the few real true silver linings of the COVID pandemic that it's really sad to me to see like everyone go back indoors. And then also maybe you could just comment about like the way we prioritize, where the al fresco dining is, because I know in Los Feliz Village, there's a restaurant that I have patronized where the al fresco dining is in the sidewalk and you can't get through there with a stroller or a wheelchair or anything. And I'm like, why don't they just take over a car storage space and put it there? Because, and I could be wrong, and I'm definitely speaking, my own opinion here, but I feel like a free car storage on a public street is like, should be the lowest priority to me, but like dining outside is nice. It's a revenue generator. A car just being stored is a revenue cost. But
yeah, no, totally agree with you. And I think, Sunset Boulevard along in Silver Lake also has several restaurants that, are great environments to be in, have a great brunch or a glass of wine, but do make it challenging to walk through with a dog, with a stroller, etc. My friend has a dog with wheels, and so getting through a couple blocks in that Silver Lake section is challenging.
And our sidewalks are famously not always great, although the ones on Sunset are
they're wide enough.
Yeah,
they'll do, right? So I think on the al fresco front, I think Larchmont Village is also a very interesting place where we have kind of the opposite problem, right? We've got a lot of it. And so we're actually working pretty, we're going to be in Larchmont Village in a couple of weeks to do a little bit of a site visit and visit there with LADOT and just kind of think about like, how can we be more strategic about al fresco moving forward? As for the speed limit and the adjustments that were made available with AB 43, I believe, which allowed kind of cities to get away from that 85th percentile. And Kyle, I'm guessing you're going to ask what that is. We'll be right there.
Ask for a term defined.
But AB 43 allowed local jurisdictions to determine, to have more flexibility in determining speed limits. So we know that LADOT, when that was first passed, 5-ish years ago, did kind of a first cut. We have engaged and kind of asked what options we might have available for Sunset Boulevard, particularly in our commercial pockets, right? In Silver Lake, Echo Park, et cetera. So stay tuned. Those are ongoing conversations. And Kyle, to the glossary question. So 85th percentile is kind of this archaic rule. Oh my God, I'm going to really keep myself from going into a spiral about nerdy transportation rules that really don't have a lot of standing.
I'm here for it if you want to go there.
But the 85th percentile rule states that the guidelines for establishing a speed limit is that whatever the 85th percentile drives at, that should be the speed limit. So
even if people exceed the speed limit, if everyone is going faster than the speed limit goes up.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
which isn't necessarily great,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that is the 85th percentile, and that legislative change was a big win for jurisdictions and transportation planners and advocates. The next question is how you enforce that, and then that's where we talk about design and other strategies.
On the subject of road design, so I'm trying to look for the motorcycle routes that have the fewest amount of turns possible. So, the section of Santa Monica Boulevard up here through Atwater going down that way, maybe till I hit Western or so is fine. Or I'm conflating the streets. It's a blur right now. Thanks Google Maps for taking over that part of my brain. But the section of that is up here, feels like a road that I can safely scoot on. And as soon as I get into once you hit Beverly Hills, then past Beverly Hills into West LA, it's just like, whoa.
Oh, it opens up. I think big part of it is like, who are the different jurisdictions that play, right? And so State Route 2, right? Or Historic Route 66, one or the other, for a long time was under the jurisdiction of Caltrans. And I believe the segments that are in Los Angeles are still under the Caltrans jurisdiction. West Hollywood, Caltrans was able to relinquish ownership to the city of West Hollywood. That's why it's designed in a very different way. And I don't quote me on this, but I think the same must be true for Beverly Hills because they were able to have that. But yeah, you cross Wilshire and you go through Century City, and my gosh, that is a freeway.
Yeah. Oh, I guess do you interface with Caltrans at all for your work?
Occasionally, yes. So whenever we're touching or having a conversation about Santa Monica Boulevard, or there's a request coming for improvements on Santa Monica Boulevard, we have to bring in Caltrans. And similarly, for State Route 2 and kind of the area around there on and off ramps.
Who else? That's a good makes me wonder. Who else would we want to interface with Caltrans? This is a statewide thing. Do we talk to our assessor?
I would say the assembly members, and
or that's what I meant. Assembly person, yeah.
Our state representatives are really helpful in helping to communicate with Caltrans, whatever might be important or need to be communicated.
This particular region is Jessica Colosa.
Believe so.
Yeah. And then a lot of the core, though, was the one that John Yee was running for when we had him as a guest. This is maybe this is too not interesting to ask, but it got me thinking about just bad streets around here. And a friend visiting also asked, why are the streets so bad, particularly here? It seems like a certain part of the city, like the core of the city, maybe the streets were paved in the 20s and 30s. It's concrete streets instead of asphalt. What's that about?
Yeah, you know what? That's a question that I've asked, and the question that I've asked is how do we fix them sooner? And so the answer I have or the only information I've gotten is that they're much heavier lift because they are that concrete rather than that asphalt. It's a more robust approach. You can't just put a slurry on top because then you can't quite just patch it. So it's a little bit of a bigger lift, and I think those streets are on like a slightly different timeline than our traditional repaving strategy.
Did they just think concrete made more sense in the 20s or something? Because you can see the contractor stamps in some of them, and it's always like the 20s and 30s, these old concrete streets, and they're the most broken ones.
You notice this when you're biking or scooting or whatever, but when you get to bus stops, there's usually a big old slab of the road that is a different material than the rest of it. Is that like a concrete v asphalt kind of thing? What is that?
I believe those are concrete pads usually for the bus stops, right? And I think that's just because they are more resilient and less likely to be damaged, right? So I think there's a couple on Sunset that come to mind where it is very clear that the buses have kind of morphed the asphalt, right? And you have wavy fun.
Although it got leveled recently by the Vista. There was an area where it was starting to feel like a couple of streams beds were forming or holloways.
It's that kind of thing. And so that's, I believe, Metro standard for bus stops. And again, don't quote me, but I'm fairly sure that's how that happens.
How are the bike lanes maintained and how are they cleaned?
Yeah, so for regular bike lanes, those just fall under the standard street sweeping schedules. For the protected bike lanes, right, those big hefty sweepers aren't going to quite fit in the 5 to 6 feet that we have.
I'm imagining bicycle pedal powered street sweepers.
I would volunteer for that.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, well, I'm going to sign you guys up for something, but. There are mini street sweepers. Do you guys want to take a gander of how many we might have in the city?
I'm going to say 6.
4.
I'm going low. We're going low.
Oh boy, we have 2. We have 2 citywide.
I was trying to do Price is Right rules. We both went over.
And do you guys want to guess how often those 2 are able to get to all the protected bike lanes?
Once every 5 years.
Maybe it's slightly better. Twice a year.
About quarterly.
Okay.
About quarterly. So, a little bit more optimism. But it is something we submitted a motion for, and we got a report back a couple weeks ago, just kind of outlining what the costs associated with, like, one, upping them and get the equipment and the staff necessary to do this on a biweekly basis, like most of our streets. So that's incoming. Obviously, we'll be part of the conversations budget for the city budget. Obviously, it's a very challenging thing, so we'll see if we're able to squeeze in some protected bike lane sweepers. That said, in the interim, we are hoping to purchase an electric bike as well as a bike-powered sweeper. So if you guys are serious about volunteering, I'm gonna put you guys to work. And so stay tuned. We're very excited about that as an option, and so we're exploring that, and we'll see if we're able to actually put some wheels on the ground and do some scooping.
That's really cool. I guess like one thing that I noticed, the bike lanes that are near me, and I've talked to other bikers in my neighborhood about this, but like, oh, this particular block has a bunch of low hanging trees. Like, I know it's going to take forever for the city to do something about it. Like, hey, could we just go out there and clip it? Or, I guess one thing that I think is really exciting is the prospect of volunteering, of civic engagement, of stuff like that. Like, hey, I do beach cleanups and water sampling for fun, right? And I guess in terms of, I feel when folks get really hung up on, oh, the streets are dirty, this, blah, 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 I think the more productive thing to be saying is, well, what can we do about it? And I guess thinking about like the avenues for, I don't know, getting a bike powered sweeper, like how practical is implementing something like that? And what are the channels? Like here's what I'm trying to say. If you as a citizen just go out and do something, right? What are the odds of you doing something like street cleaning, street sweeping, something like that? What are the odds of you running afoul of your city or of law enforcement? How does that dynamic play out?
I think it depends, but I think I think you're unlikely to get a whole lot of pushback if you're doing cleaning things like that.
I'll just say personally, I've gotten some like raised eyebrows from police, but never, they're like, what is he doing? Or like, I'm planting a tree, in a tree square.
I will say something that Council Member Soto Martinez says often is, those are all opportunities to step in and one, identify where as a city our services have failed or have not quite met the needs of the community. And so how do we identify, while we're working on the policy fixes so that this is something that is, doesn't have to be addressed by individuals, what are the fixes? And I think that's, when we're thinking about an e-bike and bike-powered sweeper, that's an interim solution for as we're waiting for broader policy. And
you can have both too, because like one of the, I feel like I like really clean cities. I like vibrant cities. Those two things are not opposed. Tokyo is incredibly clean, and for whatever reason, there's no waste bins anywhere, so everyone just carries around their trash and throws it away. But they also so obviously there's there are people that are paid to keep it clean, but there are also trash clubs. You see trash clubs in Tokyo, and they're going around and like they're just. I remember this was in Kyoto. I remember seeing a guy like looking for a while, and then he finally found like a cigarette butt in like a potted plant. And I was like, I don't even know if that counts, but he was so excited, like, I found a piece of trash. So locally, we have trash clubs in Los Feliz. I know 2 in Silver Lake, Trash Humans in Silver Lake Trash Club, Echo Park Trash Club. There's probably a trash club in your neighborhood that, it's like they'll usually give you a grabber, and it's kind of like a fun social thing, as much as it might not sound like it would be fun, but I don't know. I like cleaning up stuff.
And then I think an organization comes to mind, Streets Are For Everyone, so SAFE.
Yes.
Damien Kevitt heads up that organization. They do bike lane cleanups on their group. So, they were kind of the inspiration for this, for what we're hoping to do on Hollywood Boulevard.
That's awesome. How about, Rogelio, what projects are you most excited about that you're working on right now?
I am most excited for Hollywood Boulevard Phase 2. So figuring out how we can support BOE and LADOT as they kind of work through the different networks that are required to go in for HLA. I believe it is both on the transit enhanced network and on the bike enhanced network and the pedestrian district network. So there's a lot of improvements that are going to need to come to that. And so we're very excited to see how that comes together. The other project I'm really curious to follow, especially this one's a little bit more from a from a resident perspective, or taking off my work, is Vermont. I think we're going to learn a lot about the Vermont BRT corridor and kind of that implementation, both from a really seeing what it looks like to prioritize a key transit corridor in the district.
In the city.
In the city.
Yeah, it's like
nationally. It's one of the
it's
biggest.
A lot of people go up and down Vermont.
And then seeing how that works. And we're going to have a lot of lessons from that, both for HLA implementation and how you pair that with other investments in the mobility network. So that's kind of what I'm excited about. And I would also say, Sunset Corridor has a lot of work coming to it, and so Sunset for All. Speaking of all the advocacy groups that I seem to be mentioning today, they've been phenomenal and really kind of like painting a vision and kind of shaping the conversation around what can Sunset Boulevard look like. And so I'm excited for the city to kind of pick up the mantle and say, what can we do?
We'll have 36 links to organizations in the show notes.
Please follow.
What? Do you have anything you want to plug that's coming up? Like
things that we want to plug. I would say join our newsletter, because we are working to get more and more volunteer opportunities out. It's also where we'll be, sharing updates for big important projects and kind of policy initiatives. And I think our communications team does a great job of, distilling what happens every week, day in and day out, and putting it in a newsletter, and also connecting folks to other resources. So that'll be my one plug. And yeah,
I'll say that, my neighbor says that I have civics disorder, but I am subscribed to multiple neighborhood council region newsletters, because even if I don't live in that, it's still, especially with transportation, like we always talk about, it's not, your pocket is not like, it's a network, right? It's going into different regions. So like I am invested in what's going on in CD1 and CD4 and CD13. And so, consider, subscribing to multiple, city council newsletters. Since I didn't get here today using transit,
I took the Angels flight to the second floor of the apartment.
No, but the other day it was my friend's birthday in Highland Park, and I took the 182 over there, which is the transit app said, I was taking a nap. The transit app's like, leave now, which I always wish it gave me a little bit of a heads up, because it's like the bus will be here in 3 minutes. Yeah. So I put on a shirt, put on pants, put on a belt, grabbed a jacket, and like struggling to get my arm into the jacket, went outside, caught the bus, got there. I honestly, I always say this, I don't know how long it takes, because I don't care, because it's not like a prison sentence. I'm on my phone or reading or looking out the window, and then I don't know, maybe it's like 15 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. I really don't know. And then I got there, and then taking the bus back, there was someone else on the bus, Alan McLeod, who hosts the Walkin' About podcast. And I was like, you won't run into people that host podcasts about walking about in, sitting in traffic, or, all your car-free people, your Octavia Butlers and your Ray Bradburys and DJ Waldies and stuff. Like, you're going to run into those people. And he knew who I was. I knew who he was. We were both like talking about it. And he was going to a party in Silver Lake, and I was coming back from one. He lives in Highland Park, I think. So that was just like, it's just like a nice moment in transit. I love those. I love when people are asking me, like, do you know how to get here, or just like engaging with people. It's actually fun to take the bus. It's fun to ride a bike. It's fun to walk. It's very rarely fun to drive inside of the city. I like driving on road trips, but so that was my transit story. My plugs, because I don't know when this will come out, but I doubt we're going to have it out too soon. But the penultimate Silver Lake Walk will be on May the 4th. It will not be Star Wars themed, but someone did tell me they will be bringing a lightsaber, so that's fine. And then the final Silver Lake Walk will be on probably June 1st. And that's going to be an evening one, because it just seems like a nice way to send off doing these 6 walks around different parts of Silver Lake. Hopefully to be published as a self-guided walking tour about history and culture, architecture, all that. And then my magic wand is to close the 2 freeway stub and to turn that into a linear park like they have in Seoul and in Paris and some place called New York City, and like just close it and put some trees there and have people hang out there.
So my plug is, I recently posted for Earth Day, I posted my first, the link to the first Comic-Con discussion panel that I hosted. Back in October, I hosted environmental activism in Final Fantasy VII. I wanted to host some panels at Comic-Con. We play a lot of, fantasy games that are about like making change, saving the world. And I would love to help inspire people in the real world to do that. And, Final Fantasy VII inspired me to do that as a little kid, right? So I posted that first discussion. It was my first time hosting a panel, so it was a little rough around the edges, but we got some folks from Heal the Bay, Crystal Sandoval from Heal the Bay, Olivia Munoz from Surfrider, my pal Dorian from Sustainability, and my artist friend Monty, who's also a super fan, where we talk about environmental issues in game and how they relate to environmental issues in Los Angeles. I'm also working on pitching a few panels to San Diego Comic-Con, similarly nerdy activist, sciencey kind of intersection stuff. And listeners, I would love to, I'm still brainstorming this idea, and Eric, I'm going to keep poking you about this, but I want to pitch maybe something like LA Transit in pop culture for LA Comic-Con in the fall. So listeners, if you have any ideas for me to hone in on what that panel discussion could be, what you would like to hear, let me know and comment at us. We'll try to craft something that hopefully gets picked up.
I can think of, movies and music. I can't remember if I've shared this before, but it was seeing Speed when I was in school in Iowa that made me realize that there was a subway being built because that's where the showdown is. I haven't seen it since it was in theater, so that it's, and it's all about a bus, and like that can't slow down and like freeway traffic and stuff. But that really was, as silly as it sounds, that was a moment where I was like, because I'd always kind of written off Los Angeles. I was like, oh, they have subways though? Okay, well, maybe it's not so bad.
So I love Speed, and that's the first thing that came up to mind. But sounds like I've got boats, less exciting. But sounds like I have a hike to go to, and I'm so curious to follow on your sustainability panels. How awesome! I'll just go ahead and redo the plug I had for our newsletter. Again, Eric, I'll ask you to kind of link our website under this. But it's where we have all our updates for all the work that we're doing, all the policy change that the council member is championing, as well as events and opportunities to volunteer. And that's something that we really want to work on, is build out that volunteer core. As you mentioned, Kyle, there's a lot of appetite and people that want to do some good in the neighborhood, and we want to help facilitate that as well.
Oh, magic wand item. This is so minor, but lately, since I've been taking the buses more, I love how the buses look at night. The dark, like the silver side paneling, like the darker floors, the yellow accents. It really stands out. It's really vibey. Yeah. I feel like riding the bus at night is like you are a lo-fi YouTube playlist thumbnail image, right? I want that same aesthetic for the trains. The bright whites just feels clinical in a way that I can't vibe as hard on a train as I can on the bus.
The new train cars do have different lighting, I believe.
It's very bright.
The preview, but when I had the preview on the new, like the center facing ones, I remember it being different. I just don't remember if it was brighter or less bright, but I feel like it was less harsh.
Is it like during Critical Mass they turn on all the multicolor LEDs and
it wasn't that. It wasn't that
music on the trains? I'd like that.
Rave trains.
Yeah, rave trains.
You gotta take the pickup line in West Hollywood. I'm telling you, that's the most like club vibe. It's a bus route, but it's free and they have music and other stuff.
I will. I guess I'll add my wish list. But if I had a magic wand, I'm getting. Is that Santa Monica Boulevard to Sunset Boulevard is getting a bus lane. My gosh.
Yeah.
Getting to right on the 4 or the 2, and I'm obviously biased. Those are my primary buses, would be phenomenal and really kind of be a game changer.
Yeah, maybe any street, this should be like a law that we try to pass or an ordinance. Any street that had a train on it at some point now has to have a dedicated bus lane. So Santa Monica Boulevard, famously built to connect downtown Los Angeles to Santa Monica via Silver Lake and Sunset Junction was the...
Don't give me an idea to give my boss a headache. I do want to take a moment and just thank you both for having me. My God, this has been... I'm not sure how... Kyle, I know you keep giving us time checks, but this has been absolutely delightful. You're giving me the opportunity to yap and be a nerd about transportation things. I am going to yap. So thank you. Thank you for your patience, and looking forward to next time.
Listeners, it always helps if you leave us a review, leave us a comment, leave us a rating. The evil-natured robots that are programmed to destroy us love when you do that, and we love to hear from you. Our Instagram is at Nobody Drives an LA Pod. I think we are on, our email is nobodydrivesanlapod at Gmail, if that's the way you want to, but it's probably better to just DM us. I don't check the email as often as I should. Oh, we also just launched our YouTube page where Eric and I posted a, walkabout train exploration thing.
On Transit Day, we took Metrolink out to to Claremont.
We were going to go to Montclair, but someone suggested we go to Claremont instead. So, we may do more stuff like that in the future when inspiration bites. So, look at that. And our YouTube is, also Nobody Drives an LA Pod. You'll see the pink and yellow image art, and it's us.
And I did make a Blue Sky page, but I don't. Whatever. It's go there if you like Blue Sky. I don't know. I just don't. I'm sorry. I'm the worst at selling stuff. That's why, as an artist, when I had gallery representation, they're like, never talk. Don't buy this. It's not. It's got mistakes. No, there's a Blue Sky.
Thank you guys so much. That was a blast.
Well, all right. We'll see you in
the dedicated bus lane.